So good morning, everyone, from across the north, to our In Conversation with Nigel Huddleston. And this morning, we're going to be talking about what's next for the UK tourism industry. Really delighted that the Minister has joined us this morning. Nigel is the Permanent Under-Secretary of State for Sport, Tourism, Heritage at DCMS. And that includes also gambling, lotteries, Commonwealth Games, also culture, sports and arts sector, recovery plan from COVID. So a big portfolio. So really welcome this morning, Nigel. Really glad you could have half an hour to talk to us. I'm joined obviously by businesses across Greater Manchester, but also businesses and colleagues from across the north. We work really closely together. And I guess it's a long time since you've been to Manchester. We haven't been allowed to travel freely. And I just wondered, when were you last in Manchester and what were your impressions?
Oh, not so long ago, last year. And of course, you know, every couple of years we come to Conservative Party conference in Manchester as well. And then in my previous job, before I was a member of Parliament, I used to be in Manchester frequently. I worked for Google. We had an office in Manchester, lots of clients in Manchester as well. So I used to work a lot in Manchester, stayed in many hotels. Every now and again, you even get to stay at the Midland, but it's usually the Radisson or the Hilton that I stayed at. And yeah, love it. Great. Always had a good time. Always incredibly welcoming. And actually, as I was just saying in our pre-conversation as well, I've been up to the Northwest a couple of times since I've been appointed in this role back in February. But I'm looking forward to coming to Manchester. So early next year, let's make it a date. And given my portfolio, it's great. You know, I've got sport, tourism, and heritage. So many boxes to tick in a trip to Manchester. So we'll be working with you on where I should go and what I should do, and we'll probably make it a couple of days trip.
Oh, that'd be so good. Thank you. And in terms of, you know, on the Google side, we've got booking.com, we've got massive e-commerce here with GCHQ also coming into Manchester. So on that side, we've got plenty of other things to talk about too. But today it's about tourism. And to kick off, really, you know, what a 6 months we've all had. And I wondered, you know, with the tourism industry, we think in terms of the losses to the economy from our £9 billion economy, we think we'll have lost about 60% of it. So 5.3 billion by the end of the year is massive. And we can already see job losses right across the whole piece. Restaurants closing. We've had, you know, businesses that have been in the city. Earth Cafe, set up in the 1990s. Nexus Art Cafe, again in the Northern Quarter. We've got a situation now in the Northern Quarter where lights are completely off, whereas across the road we've got queues outside Primark. So it's a tricky time. And so I wondered, really, to kick off, could you sum up the government's response to supporting the sector and perhaps some reflections on the tier system, which I know has been complicated for everyone, as the first part of the question, and then we can perhaps go on to look at recovery plans.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt this, you know, the pandemic has hit swathes of the economy. But really no sector more so than the travel sector and the tourism sector, you know, broadly defined. And you're right to include, you know, pubs, bars, restaurants in that. Other parts of my portfolio, heritage, colleague of mine, Caroline, oversees museums and so on. All of these elements that require, you know, movement of people, physical interaction, social interaction. Those are the very things we've not been able to do for a long period of time. So in response to that, the government did recognise quite early on the particular needs of the tourism sector. So, of course, we go way back to March, and very, very quickly the furlough scheme was announced. And actually, one of the sectors most, who adopted that most highly is travel and tourism, very, very high percentage. But more than that, the loans scheme started to kick in, and the bounce back loans, again, adopted a lot by the travel and tourism sector. And then a few specific measures as well. If we think of the business rates relief, the grants, many of them specifically targeted towards retail and hospitality and leisure. And then, of course, a major change, something I know many people in the sector have been asking for many years, the cutback in tourism. That alone was a £4 billion intervention, which is greater than any other sector has had in terms of a sectoral intervention. The Eat Out to Help Out scheme, just in 1 month, now the numbers have come in, that was an £850 million intervention as well. And then, of course, as we were unable to open up to the extent that we really would have liked to do, and we went into the second lockdown, we've had to extend the furlough scheme now to March as well next year. So, look, we've said along, the government said all along, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have reluctantly said all along as well, we will not be able to save every job. This is such a huge hit on the economy. But the interventions that we've taken are geared to try and save as many jobs as possible. And also, I'm aware with some of the grants that have gone out and some of the furloughing scheme, some businesses have decided to effectively, mothball with the hope of starting up again later on in the year or the spring. And of course, now I do think, though, let's take a glass half full view to this. I know you want to talk about future later on, but the game has changed fundamentally with the vaccine and the announcement of vaccine. So we're not just talking about if we get a vaccine. We're now talking about when we actually start deploying it, and jabs are going in arms from next week. So it's a fundamental different game now. We can now look far more positively about the future, but I do not want to underplay the impact on the sector, the horrendous job losses we've already experienced. But now I think we can be more confident about recovery than in the past. On the tiering that you mentioned, look, nobody wants to have the lockdown measures that we've got, but we have to have them because we are still dealing with a deadly virus, and we have to take measures to stop people from dying at the end of the day. That's what it's all about. And therefore, reducing the social interactions and the risk of the spread of infection means that we have to make interventions that mean that for a temporary period of time, people are not being able to do the things that they would like to do. Given that that goal is to save lives, I don't think that's an unreasonable request. And obviously, we've seen the vast majority of the public understand and accept them. But we do need to move out of the tiering system as soon as we can, and we need to move down the tiering systems as soon as we can. And I think we've seen in the Northwest, we've seen across the country that when we adopt these measures, we can actually make a difference and have a more optimistic future. They're massively inconvenient. They're having a massive impact on jobs and businesses. There's no doubt about it. But to be honest, there aren't many other alternatives that we could adopt in order to achieve the goals of reducing the infection rate. So I'm aware of the impact. No government wants to make those measures unless we absolutely believe they're necessary.
Yeah. So just before we go on the recovery side of things, I think we're in quite a precarious time now with December being the majority of sales, special cost retail, theatres with the panto season, and restaurants. Up to 40% of the takings are in that Christmas month. So we've got businesses just waiting for a potential review on the 16th, which would be crucial for them. Yeah. So Manchester Hoteliers Association, for instance, would have estimated that they will lose just in March alone 37 million. In December alone, just in 1 month. And the footfall over lockdown, although it was down about 80%, but with the restriction changes this week, that's improved. So we're seeing about 50% changes, but we're just not getting the visitor numbers in because no one is traveling. And so both of those sectors in particular, as well as the cafes, bars and restaurants, which are closed, and all the venues and sporting events and venues are closed, December would have been a brilliant month in terms of revenues. So we're all waiting, bated breath, for the 16th in terms of some 2 weeks of trading, of that essential trading, to bring some pennies back in the tills. So what I'd just like to hear in terms of what can we expect on the 16th, do you think?
Well, I'm afraid I don't have a crystal ball either, because I know a perfectly valid question, but you'll understand I don't have an answer for you yet. But as I said, look, the whole purpose of the tiering system and the lockdown measures we've just gone through is to reduce the infection rates. And my understanding is that infection rates are coming down. And of course, as the infection rates come down, then that means that we can go into the lowest tiering. I mean, remember, every minister is also a constituency MP, so I have this pressure as well in my constituency. My actual constituency is tier 2, but I'm right next door to Birmingham, which is tier 3, and therefore a lot of businesses in my constituency is asking the very same questions that you're asking me today as well, from a constituency MP angle as well as the ministerial angle. But I would say, look, the 16th, the Prime Minister said very clearly, you know, we're going to review the tiering every couple of weeks. We'll have a look at that. It's in legislation at the moment, and he's promised that we'll look at the legislation again, I think, in early February. So it's under constant review. But I would say, look, one of the things to understand, because I say, let me reiterate this point, no government wants to take these measures of effectively stopping business. When we're stopping businesses from operating, that means that people are not necessarily in jobs, they're not paying their taxes, they're not generating the income that we all desperately need in order to get the economic recovery going. We're all in this because, of course, the thing that we all want is for employment to get back up, for businesses to start operating again and generating those taxes. Because in the meanwhile, and playing out furlough money instead, all we're doing is increasing the future taxation. You know, that is not a goal of the government as an end entity. We all want to do the best we can to open up as soon as possible, but it's all within the context of, you know, a very serious health crisis. It's not as if we're making those decisions in isolation. It's in the context of the health crisis outcomes. But I would say, and I encourage every business to take advantage of every single government scheme that is available, whether it's local authority grants, and there's some grants that have come out some at a discretionary level, where actually it was specifically stated to target at sectors that we know are particularly exposed: retail, hospitality, leisure, the conference and event sector as well, and their supply chains. You know, encouraging the money to go in that direction. Obviously, the furlough scheme again, unfortunately, you know, but that's had to be extended. But take advantage of it. If that's the route to survive and go through to next year, when we're all now confident that demand will come back, you know, reducing the volume of activity, reducing costs in any way they can, taking advantage of all the schemes available, let's do that. But as I say, we are now looking at a far more optimistic and positive 2021. But as I said, don't misinterpret me. I'm not going to pretend or hide the fact that these are really difficult times. It's going to be a difficult winter, and many businesses were looking forward to generating a large amount of money in December, and I'm aware that that might not happen now. And I know, you know, I'm close to a lot of businesses, you know, in my constituency across the country. I'm hearing this. It's frustrating and disappointing, and I know, but the goal is to try and open as much as we can as soon as we can, but that doesn't mean everything.
No, thank you for that. And I think I'm glad you brought up about the business support, because it has been quite confusing, I think, because there's so many grants, etc., to go for. So we've been trying to help, and we've put together a specialist advice team to specifically advise, give advice to businesses across all of the advice that you can get hold of. And right across Greater Manchester, the 10 boroughs, the take-up is pretty strong, and we've had to push that perhaps in the city centre a bit more. But I guess and
on that, actually, can I say thanks for doing that, because actually DMOs and other organisations and local authorities across the country have done a really good job at trying to encourage applications. And I know some entities are reluctant to kind of go for government money, you know, and also some aren't aware of it. And even now I hear companies going, they weren't aware of certain grant schemes or what was available. So thanks for doing that, because I say there's no shame at all in taking every advantage of every single one of these programs that's available. But I do understand that not everybody is aware of them. We're trying to produce as much on the government website, but the work that you're doing to also make it clearer, because I know sometimes it can be confusing and the wording can be a bit odd. But you know, the work that you're doing to encourage that, thank you for doing that, because we really rely on you to push that message at a local level.
Yeah, and we will provide that for everyone who's listening in today, those contacts again. And that's not only on the business support advice. So for you know, financial advice, we've got some great advisors who can, you know, bank loads, or if you want to mothball, or, you know, continuity, access to grants, but as well as that, recruitment for staff, re-employment, etc. So there's some really good support there. So I guess the you know, the tiering system, we'll wait to see what happens on the 16th. I know that you haven't got a crystal ball. I think the tourism hospitality industry as a whole perhaps feel really hard done to, because it's, you know, in Manchester, and I know tier 3 is also in Lancashire, and the rest across the northwest, they might be in tier 1 or 2, but they still feel the impacts of that, you know, non-travel, particularly up in Cumbria. So the whole of the gateway to the north is impacted. So I think in terms of feeling hard done to, what can we say now about how do we recover from this? How do we go forward? What can DCMS do in terms of recovery plan to come out of this?
Well, on that very last point, we are indeed developing a recovery plan, and that actually was part of the Global Travel Task Force announcements that last week. The commitment to having a tourism recovery plan was in that. Throughout the entire pandemic, I've had regular meetings, in particular with industry bodies, who've done a great job providing me with real-time information and data. We had a visitor economy working group, the Tourism Industry Council, the tier groups led by Visit Britain, Visit England has been fantastic. Constant flow of information from stakeholders coming into us, which has been pivotal actually at enabling me and my colleagues here at DCMS to go to the Treasury, because all roads always lead to the Treasury, to ask for things and interventions that we need. And if it wasn't for that real-time information flow and expressing the real, quite frankly, dire states of the tourism sector, then we've really had to make the case strongly to the Treasury based on the data that we've had. But that is exactly why we got the £4 billion VAT cut. That's why we had the Eat Out Help Out scheme. It's why we had the Enjoy Summer Safely and the Escape the Everyday marketing campaigns. So I know the sector sometimes said, oh, we haven't had any sector specific support. It's like, yes, you have. I just listed a few there. And there are many, 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 many other sectors of the economy that also would love to have had sector support, and they didn't get it. So I would say, look, whilst I understand it may not have been everything that everybody wanted and that there was an ask for more, I would just say, just be a little bit careful, because actually the sector has had a lot of support. It's had not only greater access than many other parts of the economy to some of the general support measures like furloughing and loans, but actually it has had some very specific support as well, and other sectors hadn't. So I'm not expecting gratitude or anything as such from the sector in terms of this, because it was based on need. But I do think it's important that we don't go around saying, oh, the government's not done anything, they haven't given us support, when actually there's a whole slew of measures that clearly show that we have given very specific direct measure. And actually the door's always open. The Treasury have said this, that to creative ideas of support as and when needed. And things like the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, it was the first in the world that anything like that happened. And I say it wasn't an insignificant sum as well, 850 million. So yeah, the measures have happened, but I'm aware we've not been able to get everything that everybody wanted or asked for. I've not been able to get everything that I asked for. But just do acknowledge the fact that there's multiple demands on the Treasury, with every single industry sector knocking on the door saying, we've got a special case, can you help us as well? I think we've done okay, actually, given the context and the other demands.
Okay, and so on to another really important aspect for us in the north, and in terms of our airport. And I just heard this morning, actually, airport has just announced COVID testing facility, a new facility at Manchester Airport that's just going to be opened. So that was news today. But in terms of our recovery plans, so we've been working with our investment agency and airport on a route development plan to restart those really valuable routes that we've spent the last 3 years creating, in particular, India, China, those new tourist destinations coming in. So we talked about temporary APD restrictions. There is a regional airport development plan. Can you say something about what expected from the government in terms of trying to kickstart and help those airports open up and start trading again?
Yeah, again, a sector that's been hit really hard. I mean, I do work very closely. I'll be careful about not stepping on his toes, but just to give you the reassurance, as tourism minister, obviously inbound and outbound is vital to that. Rob Courts is the aviation minister. Before that, it was Kelly Tolhurst. I'm in almost daily conversations with them, as are my officials, because of the importance of international travel to the tourism sector, and indeed business travel, which often then adds a tourism element to it. It's really important. So I got my emails as well this morning from Manchester Airport Group, Manchester Airport and East Midlands on the new testing. Actually, you asked me when I was last in Manchester. It was flying out of Manchester Airport, actually. It's a sector that is vitally important and something that the UK is really strong with. I think we have the third largest aviation sector in the world, and it brings in a lot of export revenue. So in terms of where we're going, obviously the changes announced by the Global Travel Task Force to ease some of the quarantine measures, the new testing that will allow people to reduce their isolation to 5 days, the constant review of the travel corridors, and the hope and aspiration that we add more and more countries to that travel corridor list as time goes on. You're correct that actually the government's announced a review of regional connectivity, of air connectivity, and we'll be working on that, as well as actually a review of the tax system for travel as well. That was announced earlier in the year. Those decisions will be primarily led by the Department for Transport and the Treasury, but we'll certainly be inputting them from a tourism point of view, and be reaching out to entities such as yourself and DMOs and so on across the country in terms of input for that. But the goal absolutely is to get international travel up and running again as soon as possible. I've been working quite closely with the G20, with G7, with the WTTC, and so on the global travel recovery, as well as our own domestic travel recovery program. And there is a good intent to get international up and running as soon as possible. We've also got to be aware that it's going to be a highly competitive environment. There's people sitting around the world on billions of pounds of credits for international travel, and all the surveys suggest really strong intent and aspiration to start traveling again really soon. So I'm confident we'll have a bounce back, quite strong actually. But we need to make sure that we in the UK get our fair share of that. So all the points you've raised are valid. We'll also be, conducting marketing campaigns through Visit Britain, the Great campaign as well, working with Department for International Trade. All of those things will be kicking in again as soon as we can. So lots of plans, but of course, relatively early stages because we've only really just started opening up again. But we'll be moving very, very quickly on that.
Thanks. And moving on to something that's really dear to Mancunian sport and culture. So sporting events are massive, and it's big business for us with cricket, the 2 football teams, with the British cycling, the home of British cycling as well. We've got the Rugby League World Cup next year. We've just had the World Athletics. So massive sporting city. So very frustrating, I think, for those fans. We can start watching in smaller numbers, of course, in other tiers. But can you say when would you see allowing spectators back in? Because that's really what the heart of those events are, and that's really what trickles out and fills Greater Manchester and the rest of the region. Sporting nights.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. I know in tier 3, it's more of a challenge at the moment, but in tier 1 and 2, just yesterday, we had across the country fans back in stadia for the first time in 266 days. So believe me, I'm well aware of the relief that had for many people across the country. I think we had 6 EFL games as well as some racing yesterday. It's limited numbers at the moment, 50% of capacity, or up to 1,000 or 2,000 for indoor, or 4,000 max in tiers 1 and 2 outdoors. And that, of course, is a stepping stone to more opening up over time. But at the moment, even in tier 1, still, we're still in a world of social distancing, and therefore there are restrictions. I have to say the measures that sports entities have gone to, whether it's a local gym or a big stadia, to make sure that customers and employees can be confident that there's measures in place to protect them, are fantastic. They've done a really good job. And many of them, of course, will be opening in a way that isn't necessarily profitable at the moment because they're so committed to getting fans back. But we will increase the numbers over time. I can't tell you exactly over what time and what the numbers increase will be, but it's fairly obvious, isn't it? The plan is to try and open up and get back to normal as soon as possible. And we're working on those steps as soon as we can, keeping a very close eye on the measures that have taken place and the opening up that has happened, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what the learnings are. Sport is huge. Sport is huge in and of itself. It's great for the mental and physical health of the nation, but also sport, including in Manchester, I've seen some figures on this, is vital as well for the tourism economy. People come just to watch some sporting events. They add hugely to the economy. Right behind me, I think I've got Wimbledon and so on. We've got major sporting events in the UK that then the economic impact of that, people come, they then go to the pubs, the bars, the restaurants, they stay overnight in hotels, they add an extra stay. The multiplier effect from sporting events and music events and other cultural events is absolutely massive. And believe me, we're very live to that here at DCMS. We're talking about this all the time. So we're making good steps, good progress. Long way to go. But as I said, in the context of further testing, better testing trace, and a vaccine, we are looking to a much more optimistic and positive 2021.
Yeah, okay. And on the other side of events, so we've got Convention Centre here, Manchester Central, which has been the hospital, Nightingale Hospital. I believe they've got, about 3 dozen patients in at the moment, but it means a loss of 500,000 delegates over the time it's been closed. It's sore loss to the city. Not only that, another 70 venues across the city. So in terms of business tourism, which is massive for us, and it's perhaps quite frustrating, I think, because it spans across so many departments in government. So there's a feeling perhaps that what can we learn from COVID? There's so many things that we have learned, whether it be digital acceleration, restructuring, what can be built back in a better way. And I think perhaps business visits and events could be that thing, that we do it better and more joined up going forward, because we talk, just last week we had a conversation with the Convention Centre in Barcelona. They're really good partners of ours, and they seem to be a bit further ahead in terms of the steps and processes to come out of COVID. And what can we learn with them? So just something in terms of the business visits and events that's so important for Greater Manchester.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. It's a hugely important part of the economy. Millions of people come to the UK each year, and again, this is export revenue for the UK economy just to come to our conferences and events. Highly competitive global environment, and some of the other countries out there are trying to get some of our events, and it's a globally competitive environment. Some of them there's ownership of some of the event venues, for example, in a way that we don't have in the UK, but we absolutely have, Manchester having several, global world-class conference and events venues. It's a very mixed bag. We're talking about, exhibitions versus massive conferences like Conservative Party conference and other things, to smaller events, wedding dresser, sales events, major medical conferences, whatever, a whole variety, touching on event venues or hotels, large and small. It touches so many points. And I would say, because of the COVID impact, the recognition of the employment and the gross value add of the events and conference sector, business event sector, is greater now than it's ever been. Every single MP has had many constituents write to them in the supply chain as well as direct events saying, look, we really need help here. I say the latest grant scheme have helped. Of course, yesterday, as well as sporting events opening up, conferences can also open up, and outdoor events actually have been able to open throughout most of the, ever since we came out of lockdown back in March, April. So we've had a lot of kind of outdoor summer events going on as well, which has been good, that enable to socially distance. But I think you're right to say we need to double down on events as a business sector in terms of making sure that they get the support and encouragement to grow going forward. I have responsibility because of my tourism portfolio for elements of it, and of course the accommodation side, and work very closely with many of the event venues as well, as obviously do you. But we also work very closely with the BASE department, who are often overseeing the kind of industry aspect. So they're working with the medical sector or industry subsectors that are, of course, showcasing and marketing their goods at these events. So BASE and DCMS together are great advocates of conferences and events. I don't think that's a bad thing to have multiple departments singing your praises, by the way, as long as we coordinate together, and I can assure you we do. I speak frequently with Nadeem Zahawi, Paul Scully, and others over at BASE about business conferences and events. And similarly, there's recognition of the importance of business travel and the events part of that with the Department for, well, actually the Aviation Minister in particular at the Department for Transport. So I would say, yes, we've got to make sure we focus heavily on that because it can be hugely important to our growth in the future. It's a growing global market as well.
Right. So, and the very last question, in the last minute, we can't go without us talking about Brexit. We've talked about levelling up plans, but that global ambition, and as you know, many plans for Greater Manchester. We've got RHS Bridgewater opening up next year, Factory the year after, a second arena over at East Manchester, Thermi Spa, all world-class attractions, which will be great in terms of positioning us in the EU and globally. Just like to say something to final words in terms of levelling up and getting out a smooth exit from the EU.
Yeah, wow, quite a big topic for the final 60 seconds. Hey, look, I would say, look, first of all, you know, we are leaving. Well, we've already left the EU, but obviously ending the transition period. I do encourage all businesses, and I'm sure you've been doing this as well. Please make sure that you're as prepared as you possibly can be, and there's a lot of advice out there on what can happen. I'm very hopeful that we'll still get a deal. And of course, as mentioned, you know, our friends, and they are friends in the EU, are vital to our economy, business, travel, tourism, everything. I think 60–70% of tourism is from the EU. We do want them to come. We need to make sure that they continue to feel welcome, as they are doing, reciprocating the other way around. You know, things like making sure that we're visa-free still is a commitment. Use of e-gate, some of the practical things there is going to continue. But I'm hopeful we'll get a deal. And then the levelling up agenda, absolutely. Look, I've got many colleagues in the north. Actually, some colleagues think as a Birmingham MP, and I'm originally from Lincolnshire, that I'm a northerner myself. Our Scottish colleagues don't consider they in the north. But you know, the levelling up agenda, making sure that investment outside of the M25 and the southeast. Look, I've got multiple incentives to argue and support that. We will deliver on that. We are delivering on that. It's fair and reasonable for the regions of the country to say, I want our fair share of. I can assure you it will be coming. There was a recently announced £4 billion fund. So lobbying your MPs, because the route for that is through MPs, and they'll be receptive to ideas. And again, the real focus there is on, you know, to be honest, successive governments have allowed the economic focus to be on London and the southeast in a way that you know is now it's time for the whole country to benefit. Tourism as well, of course. You know, 50% of all inbound tourism spend is spent within the N25. London is fantastic. It's a great anchor. It's a magnet to global tourism and business investment. But it needs to be London plus, needs to be the message going forward. And we'll be working with you on that as well. Look, thanks for your time today. Sorry, I gave much longer answers than I should have done.
Very
but always a pleasure.
Thanks very much, Minister, for joining us this morning. Really great to have a conversation with you. We'd love to take you up on that 2-day visit up to Greater Manchester and also the rest of the Northwest if you've got time. Thanks for doing that. Very Merry Christmas. Hope you have those
you as well.
Days with everyone there. Thanks to everyone for joining us. This is the last of our In Conversation this year, but we'll be back in the new year with a jam-packed programme, so we'll contact you with the details of that. Thanks everyone for joining, and continue to stay safe.
Thanks. Bye.